I know they're all, well, deceased.
How do you know that?
I said, even though it felt like I wasn't doing this physically, I was still able to see everything, and I would see them moving, and I just kept firing until they stopped moving. And I would aim at the head and whatnot.
So you were aiming at their heads?
Yeah, and when I saw they were still moving, because even though I was in this type of thing, I just didn't want them to be in pain at the same time.
All right, let me rewind a little bit. So upstairs, your mom walks in, all right?
Opens the door. She didn't walk in yet.
So the gun was loaded already?
Yes.
How many times do you shoot her?
I would say 5, 7 times.
Where do you shoot her at? What part of the body?
And then the torso and chest.
Less than an hour before the new year, on December the 31st of 2017, New Jersey teenager Scott Kologi called his mother, 44-year-old Linda, up to his room at their New Jersey home. As later reported by his family, Scott suffered from severe developmental disabilities. Even though he was in his late teens, he often slept in bed with his parents, believed in Santa Claus and needed his mother to dress him. He was also autistic and a suspected schizophrenia sufferer. On New Year's Eve, Linda entered his room to find that all the lights had been turned off. Moments later, Scott shot her dead, several times in the head with a high-powered rifle. His father, 42-year-old Stephen, rushed upstairs after hearing the shots ring out. Scott fatally shot him in the back and torso. The teenager, who at the time was reportedly wearing earplugs to drown out the sound of gunfire, made his way downstairs. He shot and killed his grandfather's girlfriend, 70-year-old Mary Schultz, whom he and his siblings called Grandmother Mary. The final victim of Scott's spree was his 18-year-old sister, Brittany, who was home for the holidays after her first semester of college. Scott shot her in the head at close range as she sat at the kitchen table. His brother Stephen Jr., who legally owned the rifle used in the massacre, escaped the Jersey Shore home unharmed, as did his grandfather Adrian. Scott was subsequently arrested at the scene. Stephen Jr. acted as his legal guardian and struggled to maintain his composure as Scott confessed to the spree upon being questioned by law enforcement. In the video-recorded interview, Scott calmly explained the circumstances of each killing, saying, "I just kept firing until they, stopped moving," and adding, "It felt like I was watching it, like I was further back in my mind." Scott was trialed as an adult in the legal proceedings that followed, during which his defense argued that he was criminally insane at the time of the killings. In contrast, the prosecution called them acts of evil of which Scott was fully aware, as he'd even researched beforehand if the weapon he was using would be effective against the bulletproof vests of responding police. He was ultimately sentenced to 150 years in prison after he was convicted on 4 counts of first-degree murder and a second-degree weapons charge. Number 7. Tyra Damika McGriff. On New Year's Day 2018, 2 women were involved in a fatal confrontation outside of a BP gas station in Jacksonville, Florida. At around 10:30 p.m., 24-year-old Sahara Barkley left her Chevrolet running as she headed into the store. Simultaneously, Shauntez Edmondson and Tyra Damika McGriff, both in their early 20s, got out of another vehicle. As shown by surveillance footage, the former stole Barkley's vehicle and drove off. In the moments that followed, Barkley, a mother of 1 who was pregnant with her second child, confronted McGriff and accused her of being an accomplice to the theft. She punched her, at which point McGriff brandished a firearm and shot her dead. Law enforcement identified the gunwoman through the surveillance footage and arrested her a few days later. She was found guilty of manslaughter and carrying a concealed weapon, for which she was sentenced to 21 years in prison. Edmondson was also arrested during a traffic stop in April of 2018 and ultimately sentenced to 10 years in prison for his role in Barkley's death. Number 6. Barry Walsh. 52-year-old Australian man Barry Walsh was spending New Year's 2017 partying with friends on Budgeboy Beach in New South Wales. A few hours into the new year, the father of 2 decided to try out a firework he'd reportedly been saving for roughly a decade. Walsh, a rugby player and surfing enthusiast, went to light it as his wife, Jo, watched him from about 100 feet away. Within seconds, The firework malfunctioned and exploded in Walsh's face, inflicting severe head injuries. Friends called the emergency services and attempted CPR on Walsh until the police and paramedics arrived at the scene, but he ultimately succumbed to his injuries. Jo, who was inconsolably distraught upon witnessing her husband's death, was sedated and transported to Wyong Hospital for a short time. Number 5. Osman Chaffar. On the morning of New Year's Eve 2019, Australian couple Veton and Lindita Musai returned to their family's home in the Melbourne suburb of Yarraville after celebrating their first wedding anniversary. After they'd removed their bags from an Uber, they were ambushed by Lindita's estranged father, 55-year-old Osman Chaffar. He shot them both in the back of the head with a handgun as they stood at the front door. Family members opened the door to find the young couple in critical condition, and Chaffar with a Smith & Wesson .38 caliber handgun to his own head, but he decided not to pull the trigger then and there. 25-year-old Lindita died at the scene in spite of her family's desperate attempts to revive her, while 29-year-old Veton passed away in a local hospital the following day. Chaffar, whom a witness described as the devil among us, walked to grassland down the road in the immediate aftermath. He placed the gun under his chin and fired. The bullet destroyed most of his right eye, but it didn't kill him. Chaffar got up and shot himself in the head once more, but didn't die on this second attempt either. He was taken to a local hospital where the bullets were extracted, and he survived with a brain injury. Chaffar had resented his daughter and his ex-wife for what he'd perceived as them cutting him off from the family. His violent and controlling behavior had led to the end of his marriage in 2008, after which his estranged wife, son and daughter took out intervention orders against him. He'd at one point sent his ex his own severed finger, as well as assaulted and threatened his daughter for choosing to live with her mother. Chaffar was enraged upon learning about Lindita's wedding months after it had taken place. He also felt disrespected by Veton for not asking for his permission to marry her. In 2021, Chaffar pleaded guilty and was subsequently sentenced to at least 35 years in prison for a double murder that a judge noted almost defied belief. Number 4. Yvonne Raquel Ramirez. Texas residents Josh McKinney and Yvonne Raquel Ramirez, both age 19, had been spending time together leading up to New Year's Eve 2017, when they went out together. According to the police, before leaving her date's Baytown home, Ramirez stole his guns and later asked him for $2,000 to get them back. McKinney, who'd been training to become a Marine, reportedly sent the young woman photos of the money he'd gathered, and she agreed to meet him on Mizell Street in Harris County. An unnamed friend of McKinney's went to the spot with him at around 4:30 a.m. and remembered him saying he wasn't going to get robbed again. The witness will report seeing McKinney holding a gun to Ramirez's head after he'd placed her in a neck hold. The witness went to call 911 and upon returning to the scene found that Ramirez had fatally shot McKinney. She was taken to the hospital with a gunshot wound to the shoulder but survived and was charged with murder. Ramirez maintained that she shot the man in self-defense. She told the police that she and McKinney had been consuming illicit substances and that at some point he'd accused her of stealing his guns, which she denied. They then got into the fight that the witness had reported. Ramirez initially claimed that the pistol had discharged and struck McKinney after it had fallen to the ground. She then admitted that as they grappled, she'd taken the weapon from him and used it to shoot him dead. Another witness reported seeing the woman manipulate McKinney's body, and blood analysis indicated that she'd removed his wallet as he was dying. Number 3. Reese Hancock. On New Year's Day 2020, British man Reese Hancock had a cup of tea with his mother at a home in Etwall, Derbyshire, England. It would later be regarded as his way of saying farewell, as he knew that he'd be going to prison for a long time. He spoke to his mother about his plans of killing his estranged wife, 39-year-old Helen, after recently finding out she'd started seeing another man. Reese and Helen had 3 children together, whom the latter had taken to her parents' house so that she could spend New Year's with her boyfriend, Martin Griffiths, aged 48. Reese took 2 kitchen knives with him and his mother's landline phones to prevent her from alerting the authorities. He couldn't find her cell phone, however, and the woman called the police, urging officers to rush over to Hancock's former marital home in Duffield. By then, 39-year-old Reese had already made his way to the address He viciously attacked Helen and Martin, slashing and stabbing them repeatedly with the knives. By the time his onslaught was over, he'd inflicted 66 wounds to his wife and 37 to her new partner. Helen, who'd separated from Reese a few months prior, was stabbed with such force that the knife handle reportedly went into her stomach. Reese then called the police to say, "I've just murdered my wife in her bed." Officers arrived and found him covered in blood inside the property, at which point he told them, "I'm hardly going to deny it. Look at me." The victims were pronounced dead at the scene, which was described by an ambulance worker as the most violent they'd seen in 17 years on the job. Reese subsequently pleaded guilty to the double homicide and was jailed for a minimum of 31 years. Number 2. Nigeria Jerome White. Pennsylvania man Nigeria Jerome White was convicted in August of 2022 of a first-degree murder that had occurred 2 years prior on New Year's Eve. 29-year-old White had waived his right to a jury trial and opted for a Delaware County judge to act as the sole decider of his case. Leading up to his death, 36-year-old Rashid Bundy had been attending a New Year's Eve party at his family's home in Norristown. White had dated his sister, and Bundy had reportedly confronted him in a breezeway over the manner in which he had treated her during their turbulent relationship. Gunfire erupted in the breezeway within less than a minute of the two men meeting up. Bundy was fatally shot in the head, and White sustained a gunshot wound to the neck, with the bullets coming from the same weapon. White's defense would maintain that he'd been a victim in a hit meant for Bundy carried out by a third party. The prosecution argued that White had actually been the gunman and that he'd been wounded in the neck by his own bullet that had ricocheted off a wall. A pizza delivery man would report hearing someone screaming, "Nye shot my brother," before identifying White as the person who then ran past him and fled in a vehicle. The prosecution also noted that White hadn't behaved like a victim but like a murderer, as he hadn't contacted the authorities in the shooting's aftermath. He remained on the run before U.S. Marshals apprehended him in Philadelphia in March of 2021. After being found guilty, White faced a mandatory sentence of life in prison. Number 1. Temple Stampede. On New Year's Day 2022, a large crowd of pilgrims had gathered at the Mata Vaishnav Devi Shrine in the town of Katra, India. They trekked through hills to reach the temple, which was one of the most visited in the country's north. An argument broke out between a group of youths in the tightly packed crowd near one of the gates where devotees entered and exited the route to the shrine. A stampede ensued at around 2:40 a.m. Dramatic footage from the scene showed several men climbing and clinging onto scaffolding, desperate to escape the crush. A pilgrim, who only gave his name as Mahesh, survived the incident after initially finding himself under a mass of people. He later told a media outlet, "I saw people moving over the bodies. It was a horrifying sight." Mahesh added that he was able to help in rescuing others caught in the stampede. Police were called to the scene and restored order, but by then at least 12 people had lost their lives and 17 others had suffered serious injuries. Thanks for watching. Would you rather wake up to firecrackers going off in your bedroom or spend a night in a cliff tent? Let us know in the comments section below.